Welcome to another DCS tutorial, and today we're going to be looking at the mission editor triggers. Now I think that many people are put off by the mission editor and rely on pre-made missions and campaigns, some of which are superb, but many aren't. Understanding the basics of the editor opens up a whole new world to players, and that's especially true of players who are learning new modules. Training missions might teach you the basics, but they only teach you a very limited process. Creating your own missions lets you focus on what you want to specifically practice without the often tiresome rigmarole of the in-game training missions. Now, this isn't a tutorial for all of the editor. I'm just looking at triggers. And whilst I will cover conditions and actions, I'm going to focus mainly on the 4 main trigger types and also flags, as I think that's what most people seem to struggle with. If you're expecting me to use my Harrier to shoot down some Vipers in player versus player dogfights, I'm afraid that will have to wait for another day. Here we are in the editor, and triggers and flags form the real core of missions, and to access them we select this icon on the left. Now there are 4 basic types of trigger: once, repetitive, switched, and mission starts. Once is probably the most used trigger type, and it's as simple as it sounds. It activates once when a certain condition is met and there is a subsequent action. Those conditions can be anything such as after a given amount of time, when a unit is damaged or destroyed or enters a zone, or when a flag is activated. Once the condition is met, then the action you select occurs, and those actions might be something like sending a message or activating another unit. Once this type of trigger is activated, that's it, done. If you meet the condition a second time, nothing will happen. So effectively, the trigger is removed from the mission. Next up is repetitive action. And once the condition for this trigger is met, the action will be repeated once every second until the condition is no longer met. Next is the switch condition. These are similar to the once trigger in that the action is performed once on activation, however they're not removed, and if the condition is met a second or a third time, the action will be repeated. Now you'll often find that switch conditions appear in pairs, depending on what the action is, and we'll demonstrate that shortly. Finally, we have mission start. Now this doesn't need a condition. The condition is the start of a mission, and the action is performed just the once. However, that action occurs in mission initialization and before players join the game. So for example, you could have an action to change the switches in the cockpit from the default position, and the player would join after that action is done and wouldn't see the switch move. But probably the most common use for this is to start various scripts and to disable units which you don't want active immediately. To better understand this, I think seeing it in action makes a lot more sense. So I've set up a little arena with 4 signal flares and an SA-15. We have a once trigger to fire an orange flare when I enter the activation zone. So we should only see that once when we first enter the zone and never again. We have a repetitive action, and this will continuously fire red flares whilst we're inside the zone. We have a switch condition, which will fire a white flare every time we enter and re-enter the zone. and it will also set an SA15 to start moving. We have a second switch condition which will stop the SA15 moving but not fire a flare, and this should highlight why sometimes switch conditions can be singles and sometimes in pairs. And finally, we have this mission start trigger, which will fire a green flare. And we'll miss that green flare actually being fired, but we should still catch sight of it while it's still in the air. Okay, let's now run the mission and watch all of this in action. Okay, we're in game and I've paused immediately. You can see that the mission time is still 0 seconds and the green flare is already in the air. As I unpause, you'll see that nothing else happens. As soon as I drive forward, the white and orange flares will fire once and the red flare will fire continuously. The SA15 will also start moving. And there you go. As I reverse out of the zone, the red flares will stop and the SA15 will also stop moving. Okay, finally, as I go back into the zone, we won't see the orange flare, but we'll see one white flare, continuous red flares, and the SA15 will start moving once again. Hopefully that will give a visual explanation of how the different triggers work. So let's now look at flags. Consider flags to be a confirmation that something has happened. So previously we saw flares go off as soon as a condition were met. But what happens if we wanted a flare to go off but not purely based on that condition being met? We'd use a flag to register and store the event. Now the number of flags is effectively unlimited. You can have several million in theory, and each flag can have a value of up to 100. So I'm going to show you how to use flags either as a simple true or false, or with a value, and then use those flags to make more complex decisions. I've set up some ground units here. On the left I have 4 BMPs, a command vehicle, a fuel truck and an SA-15, and on the right 6 rocket launchers. What I want to happen is to be notified when I've succeeded in completing the mission, and the mission goals are to destroy 2 out of the 3 from the command, fuel and SA-15 vehicles, and also over 50% of the rocket launchers. Back in the editor, we can see that the first trigger has a condition that if the artillery group has less than 50% of its units alive, its action is to turn flag 1 on. I've also put on a message to confirm the event, and I'd always recommend doing the same whilst testing missions. The second trigger lets us know that the command and control vehicle is dead, and that sets the value of flag 2 to increase by 1. The third trigger does the same for the fuel truck, and the fourth for the SA-15. So each time one of these 3 vehicles is destroyed, the value of flag 2 will increase. Finally, I want a notification that the mission is a success, and for that we need the artillery to be destroyed, activating flag 1, and also for flag 2 to have a value of 2 because any 2 out of the 3 targets have been destroyed. I've set these other triggers to destroy the vehicles automatically so we can watch it all in action. as confirmation of mission success. That's all I want to cover for today, so hopefully you found that useful, and if so, please do hit like and subscribe. I said earlier that a player versus player fight against a Viper would have to wait for another day, and it's got midnight, so it is another day.
Caution, caution. Caution, caution. Caution, caution.
Pull up.
Caution, caution. Caution, caution. Caution, caution. Caution, caution. Caution, caution. Caution, caution. Limiter off, limiter off. Caution, caution. Limiter off, limiter off. Caution, caution. 15 seconds, 15 seconds. Limiter off, limiter off. Caution. Limiter off, limiter off. Caution, caution.